We never go back to church, but we sure listened to your sermon, and we thank you so much. And it made a difference. But what caught me by surprise was that sermon was placed on the internet, and instead of just simply having 100 or 200, 300 downloads, it had nearly 20,000 downloads. It crashed all the servers. We had to keep changing servers all the time. And it became the number one on a very frequently listened to web page called audioverse.org. But it pretty soon, because it stayed at the top of the charts and it was just up there, people started noticing how many downloads, and they started complaining. And pretty soon they pulled it off of there. And so we put it on our web page, and pretty soon it crashed our server. And we had to switch servers twice already. And other churches who put it on their web page, they said they exceeded their bandwidth and they had to ask for more bandwidth. And everywhere, churches have been distributing, and I've been meeting people. We copied 100. We copied 100. I went walking the other day, just in the little back country road, and there was another people, early morning, 6 o'clock in the morning, and I noticed it was two ladies walking. I said, hello, good morning. I know that voice. Are you David Gates? Yes. I thought I recognized you. You just said good morning, but I was good enough. I recognize it. I just made 100 copies of your sermon. I'm giving them to all my neighbors. And I've been stunned at how many other people did the same thing. That one sermon wasn't intended for the general public. It was intended for my classmates. But it kind of it hit a sensitive nerve. Something is about to happen and nobody's saying anything. Americans, in general, are pretty ignorant people, because nobody's telling them anything. I spoke at a very large Adventist university just in April, and I mentioned there was a coming crisis. The president called me, and he's a very spiritual man. He said, David, what are you talking about? The nation has never been so better off since 1980. It is the best it's ever been. I said, where are you getting your information? From the news. He said, I don't want you scaring the students that there's something different. I said, students need to know something's about to happen. They better put their lives in order. Well, he stood up right after I left. He stood up and he apologized to all of the congregation that he had allowed a subject such as a coming crisis to be part of the service. Now he's embarrassed, because the whole world knows now. It's not about me knowing anything special. It's just that when, as a captain of an airplane, if we're going to go through a storm, I say, we're about ready to enter a very rough weather ahead. Please fasten your seatbelts. It's not a prophecy. It's not about being a prophet. It's that when you see rough weather ahead, the natural thing to do is say, fasten your seatbelts, right? Now, what are the implications for that for God's people? This is what I would like to share with you. God is leading in different ways, and we don't know exactly the outcome, but there's some implications to this. Number one, the wake-up call for Seventh-day Adventists, the first one, was 9/11. When 9/11 hit, Adventists should have known that this was the beginning of the end. There was a little bit of discomfort in the world. The world has never been the same again. Has it affected Australia? The whole world. I went out to the Indians, and it affected them too. I said, how did 9/11 affect you? Well, it's harder to bring things, to import things. It's harder to travel. It's harder to do this. And before we could travel freely without passports. Now they're wanting us to have passports. The Indians that are natives are having to get passports. So they said it's made our life complicated, even to be an Indian. 9/11 has affected the whole world. And that was the first wake-up call. Did most Adventists stay awake? No. Most Adventists got comfortable again. So God, in His mercy, is arranging for a second wake-up call. It might be our last. Only God knows. But we are so close to the final collapse of North America, I have to look at it and say, what are the implications? Number one, North America, if it's going to follow what prophecy says it will, to speak as a dragon. By the way, it's already speaking as a dragon. People are waiting for it to speak as a dragon someday. It already started. We're waiting someday for North America to reach across the Gulf and clasp the hand of Rome. I'm sorry. I did that a long time ago. They're now in bed together. When President Bush doesn't know what to do, he runs to the Vatican for instructions. Correct? Are you following me? We're waiting for spiritualism to be part of this. Sorry. Spiritualism can be found everywhere, even in the Adventist church. Now, the reason I'm saying, I'm not to say that we're officially pushing it. I'm just saying church members, Seventh-day Adventist church members, have no problem, some of them, with watching spiritualism and reading spiritualistic books. It's already inside and penetrated into our church from the outside. Every single church is wrestling with spiritualistic issues because the devil is out to conquer everybody, and he's aggressively through the media, through everything. Every movie today almost has spiritualistic implications. Now, if America is going to speak as a dragon and enforce the laws of Rome and bring them to pass, it has to get rid of the Constitution first. Has it already done that? Yes. America today is no longer a land of freedom. There are still some freedoms, but it's not because you have a right to freedom. It's because they're too busy doing something else to deal with it. The freedoms have already been destroyed through the Patriot Act. It is now legal for any government official to arrest anybody on just a suspicion that in their mind is a suspicion. They can hold you indefinitely. They can torture you. They can execute you legally without even telling you why. Initially, you might have noticed that the world talked about terrorists. Have you noticed a subtle change? It's now extremists. Have you noticed that? I was in Spain the other day, and I read a paper in El Mundo, the newspaper, and it said, a communique from the Vatican. Rome has communicated that anybody who criticizes Rome or disagrees with it should be prosecuted under the laws of anti-extremist laws and anti-terrorist. Did you realize those laws are really intended for Seventh-day Adventists someday? That's where Satan is going. The whole system is being prepared to deal with a people who will honor God rather than honor man. Will Adventists and Sabbath keepers of any religion be considered extremists? Absolutely. And they have laws to deal with that. While we're sleeping, the enemy has been creeping and setting up a system that is to deal with God's people. But God in His mercy has the devil handcuffed. I don't know if you know that, but he's handcuffed right now. The devil is still chained as a lion, and he doesn't have full freedom yet. He's not been released on the world. We live in a little bubble of time that's absolutely perfect for finishing the work. Let me tell you why. 4 years ago, the U.S. government and European governments and others around the world were working to identify extremist groups, Muslim groups, Christian groups, any group that was not going the same direction they were. They were making a list, and they were working to restrict funding, to restrict any kind of influence on their part. This is what they were doing for the purpose of having a master plan to stop these organizations. Now, just about that time, our General Conference president was invited to the White House. I spoke to the director of communication from the General Conference when he came down, and I just asked him, there was an article in the Review and Herald, and I asked him, would he please explain? And basically, even though they didn't talk about religious issues, the bottom line subject was, are you going to work with us or not? In very different ways. Of course, any pastor, administrator, or president, I mean, if a president of a country invited me to talk to them, would I go? Of course I would go. We need to honor our presidents, right? But if the president said to me, are you on our side or not? What would my answer be? Excuse me, what, are you talking about religious issues or are you talking about health issues? If you want to help people and help AIDS patients, if you want to help with humanitarian issues, of course we're on your side. If you're talking about compromising truth, absolutely not. We know where Rome is going. We know where North America is going, and it's not in God's direction. Correct? We have inside information. We happen to have military intelligence. Correct? Military intelligence in the Great Controversy tells us that North America will be foremost in trying to stop the religious freedoms and force nations to do that. Now, when the president of this nation says to me, are you going to work with us or not? I have to qualify my answer. and say, if you're talking about religious freedom, we will stand with you. If you're talking about health issues, we will stand with you. If you're talking about compromising on our day of worship and what God tells us to do, no compromise. Now, if North America is going to do that, and it has to do it very soon, because North America doesn't have a lot of time left to be a strong force in the world. It has only a short time. And if a Sunday law is going to come, the great controversy says that